accountable. But at the same time, we need to do that by uniting together as this region. The polluters are uniting together to continue oppressing Africa. We also need to unify our voices into one voice and put aside all our differences if we are to protect our people, to protect the women, to protect the disabled who are not in this room at this moment. Migration, as a result of climate change and displacement, I think we all know that these are happening in our countries. We don't even need science, we just need the data to confirm how many people are at risk, how many are being affected, and what are the solutions to reduce that. And when we talk about climate change wouldn't have been a problem if we didn't have the underlying issues of poverty, of gender inequality. So if we don't address those issues, then we are not addressing anything. I was talking to a friend last week, and they were asking if there's any way I could help because they have a friend walking from Karamoja to Kampala because of the ongoing droughts right now and famine. The young children in Kampala streets, most of them are from Karamoja sub-region. And why? Because of the droughts there. But it's not only droughts, but it's the poverty levels, the inequalities that are in that region. I know our government is trying its best, and I would like to urge our policymakers and the policymakers in this country, but I know this is not only for Uganda, but it's all over our region, in East Africa community and the Horn of Africa. These are cross-cutting issues. So I urge you to address the root causes of vulnerability, but also unify to one voice. The beauty of Mountain Rwenzori, the glaciers are receding, are melting at a very fast rate. Mountain Kilimanjaro, melting at the fastest rate. And of course, this is causing the riverbanks to burst and displacing very many people. And mostly the poor people, because the rich people won't settle in those flood-prone areas. So you see, climate change is not only just a climate issue, but it's inequalities. So the youth have sent me to tell you that you need to establish and implement a youth strategy for transformative youth inclusion, not forgetting women and children throughout all decision-making processes and negotiations and implementations of policies, but also focus on building community resilience and capacity, mostly on proactive measures to reduce risks and disasters. Also establish a youth climate fund. We emphasize this because we're happy to see that in the declaration there's a mention of that, so we're really grateful to see some of our points being taken in the declaration, and we hope this is a step for further collaboration with us. Thanks to South Sudan and Somalia for committing yesterday that they will continue engaging youth from today, and we'll be following up to see if you're really engaging the youth in your region. And for other countries here, we're also going to be knocking on your door. We are also committed, we're not just demanding and asking, we're also committed to continue building capacity and facilitating knowledge exchange on climate change migration nexus, but also building community resilience at grassroots and at all levels. For example, we have the Younger Migration and Climate Change Working Group, and we hope to organize events during the Conference of Youth 17 and COP27 and beyond. We'll continue holding you accountable, we promise you this. We'll continue holding you accountable and demanding you to deliver the commitments that you've made in that declaration. Unfortunately, you've not put the time when you'll be delivering those commitments, and we'll continue asking you to tell us when you'll be delivering them. And we are also committed to continue speaking for the most marginalized. So in conclusion, speaking on behalf of the youth in our region, we are looking forward to working with you, all decision makers. We're looking forward to forming sustainable solutions, peace building, and also proactive action on climate mobility in COP27 and beyond. Thank you so much. If anyone wants this copy, I'll share it with you.
Thank you very much, the representative of the youth. It is now my honor and a privilege to invite MS Oguchi Daniels, the Deputy Director General of the International Organization for Migration. Thank you.
His Excellency President Museveni, His Excellency President Salva Kiir, honorable ministers, distinguished ambassadors, youth representatives present and those with us in spirit, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me and a privilege to be able to deliver this address in the name of IOM. Please allow me to first express warmest congratulations and highest regards from IOM Director General Antonio Vitorino to the government of Uganda for having convened this meeting in a key moment for us all, when the adverse effects of climate change and environmental degradation is putting pressure on the resilience of our continent. Further, IOM commends the government in Uganda and each of the countries of the region, as well as IGAD and EAC, for their vision and wisdom in deciding to address the devastating drought, repeated floods and landslides resulting in loss of lives and livelihoods in a dedicated, action-oriented, high-level event, and committing to a historical declaration on migration, environment, and climate change. The declaration that you, the member states of the Eastern Horn of Africa, have drafted is a testimony to your leadership to advance regional cooperation and articulate a call to avert, minimize, and address displacement due to climate change and disasters. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this declaration is more than that. It's a clarion call to strengthen support to your people and to the most vulnerable to climate change impact, including your youth. But today's signing is not the end of the day. It is a major milestone in a longer journey. And in the name of IOM, I hope that this important regional call for action gives birth to a continental roadmap, and why not to a global world commitment ahead of the next COP in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, but as well stays as a morally binding reference to the next COP28 and beyond. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me a last word. As an observer to the Conference of Parties and in accordance with its mandate, including as the coordinator and secretariat of the UN Network on Migration, IOM is fully, I repeat, fully committed to echo your declaration and to support you in this endeavor, including through other member states. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, IM, for your comments. I would like now to take the opportunity to welcome, to invite Honorable Dr. Wakne Kabeyu, Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, our gracious host and the President of the Republic of Uganda, Your Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, Your Excellency Ministers of IGAD and East African Community Member States, and I recognize the presence of Acting Minister of Sudan, who is our chair, representatives from multilateral, regional, and international institutions, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of IGAD, I am honored to join you at this, the 4th Regional Interministerial Conference on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change. Let me begin my remarks by thanking the government and the people of Uganda for hosting this very important meeting and for the characteristically warm hospitality of the people of Uganda that we have been privileged to receive since we arrived. Excellencies, climate-related disasters and environmental degradation is one of the leading causes of forced displacement around the world. Increasingly, displacement attributed to natural disasters has been growing in a scale, frequently, and complexity, and continues to pose huge challenges, particularly for exposed and vulnerable populations in fragile ecological environments. For instance, the IGAD region has one of the highest concentrations of displaced population in the world. Current estimates indicate that the IGAD region has close to 14 million displaced people, comprising of more than 9 million internally displaced peoples and 4 million refugees. Among them, which the Republic of Uganda hosts millions of refugees from the region, and they are living, considering Uganda, from home, away home. And we are very thankful for the Republic of Uganda for this. To compound these challenges, Your Excellency, we are in the midst of worst drought in 14 years, with over 50 million, or 1 out of every 5 of our citizens of the region, is facing the insecurity of not knowing where, the insecurity of food, and not knowing where the next meal will come from. Nevertheless, while the level of climate-induced displacement are substantial within our region, it must be also noted that human-induced disasters are significant contributors to displacement and involuntary migration of the people and livestock in our region. I underscore the fact that it has become increasingly difficult to differentiate between the human-induced and naturally occurring disasters as immediate cause of displacement. IGAD has been vigorously highlighting the nexus between conflict, climate change, and displacement, both directly and through our member states representing in various international platforms, including in the UN Security Council. Certainly, the climate, the immediate impact of COVID and other conflicts in Ukraine compounds the long-term effects of climate change situation. It is therefore imperative that we must simultaneously have one eye on recovering from the global pandemic and resolving conflict, and at the same time keep the other eye from fixed on our efforts to cause an impact of the climate change. In this spirit that, Your Excellencies, this 4th Regional Interministerial Conference on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change has been convened by the Republic of Uganda in collaboration with IOM, enhance regional cooperation in addressing the vulnerability of our people to climate-induced displacement. For the technical consultations over the past 2 days, member states and partners identified several key issues and proposed recommendations that seek to remedy that identified challenges. In this regard, IGAD is privileged to have contributed to the draft outcome document that will be presented this morning for consideration and signature. Our submission draws upon our experience and interventions in building climate resilience for states and societies in the region. Consequently, Your Excellency, there is a pressing need for us to keep working together in the spirit of multilateralism toward inter-regional policy coherence in order to mainstream climate-induced displacement within our region nationally and policy frameworks. Your Excellency, addressing data and knowledge gaps in climate-induced displacement by investing in regional capacity for prediction and early warning, as well as understanding and applying indigenous knowledge and practices for locally applicable climate adaptation response for community is a very important intervention, we believe, as IGAD, and strengthening cooperation at all levels of government and communities to implement treaties, pacts, protocols, and regulations on free movement of people, labor mobility, and transhuman. All of these proposals in line with the joint program that IGAD is implementing together with our partners, IOM, ILO, and Platform on Disaster Displacement and UNHCR. Thanks to Uganda and leadership of Excellency President Museveni, this declaration creates the opportunity to enhance regional action and solutions. It provides us with the means to better anticipate and prevent forced displacement, and in the converse, support vulnerability and voluntary migration from areas affected by disasters and climate change. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Executive Secretary, for your remarks. It is now my privilege to invite His Excellency Ovais Samad, the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNFCCC. You are welcome.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, President Museveni, President of Republic of Uganda, His Excellency, President of South Sudan, Mr. Salva Kiir, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, my colleagues from the United Nations, Deputy Director General Danielle, UN Resident Coordinator, and all present here, all protocols observed. And I'd like to start with, first of all, thanking the government of Uganda, and especially the Ministry of Environment, both the Minister of Environment, the State Minister of Environment, for hosting us, for bringing us together in this extremely important event. I represent the United Nations Convention for Climate Change, Paris Agreement, and the COPs that we organize every year. So it's an extremely important opportunity, and it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here to listen to all the statements that have been made and the passion and the meaningful voices that I've heard today. This conference takes place at a very key moment. Incidentally, it's now 100 days from today to COP27 that'll happen in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. This conference highlights, and the declaration that you will all sign today, the synergies between, as has already been mentioned, between migration and climate agendas to seek solutions for human mobility, displacement, and migration that is caused by the impacts of climate change. Let me provide a brief global context in which we are meeting today and the climate change discourse is happening. The deadly impacts of climate change are widespread and growing, from the recent heat scorching the Northern Hemisphere, severe drought in the Sahel, flooding in South Africa, to more intense storms and sea level rise. Elsewhere, the climate crisis is bad and it is getting worse, just as scientists have predicted. Every fraction of a degree of temperature rise is a matter of life and death for many, as we just heard, especially the most vulnerable people in the developing world. For them, climate change is not a threat, it is a catastrophe, yet no nation is immune. The science is absolutely clear about what humanity must do to get off this deadly path, limit global temperatures rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. That means cutting greenhouse gas emissions we are pumping into the atmosphere by nearly half by end of 2030. That is only 8 years from now. Our goals are very clear, but we are far from meeting those goals, as we've already heard. While nations have made some progress, instead of nearly halving our emissions, we are on track to increase them by a massive 14% by the end of 2030. This math does not add up, and it adds up to disaster. That's why doubling down on fossil fuels is deeply troubling and nonsensical, regardless of the current geopolitical challenges. It threatens humanity's long-term existence on this planet. We cannot fight fire with fire. We need to move in exactly the opposite direction. That means kicking our global fossil fuel addiction and talking about the issues we have been putting off for too long. The massive transformation we need to make throughout the world, the way we produce, the way we consume, the way we live, and more, to turn things around. That's why collaboration is so important, and that's why we are here. Transformational changes can only happen if everyone is on board, north, south, east, west, rich, poor, and everyone. And especially also not only governments, but in businesses, investors, non-governmental organizations, and everyday people, and especially the youth. And I was very heartened to hear the youth representative today. COP27 is a space where the collaboration can happen, the moment where global leaders can regain momentum on climate change. This is an incredibly difficult challenge, and it won't be easy, but it is critical. Now is not the time to retreat on promises that were made in Paris for the Paris Agreement, recently in the Glasgow Climate Pact. The new transparency framework that is in place ensures countries must live up to their promises, all countries. Now is the time for bold action, tough decisions, accountability. Now is the time for political leadership. The recent reports of the IPCC are very clear. Africa is already seeing record numbers of displacement as climate change intersects with other challenges, from land degradation, from biodiversity loss, to food insecurity, resulting in social, economic, and political instability. The Paris Agreement responds to all of these threats. It includes global goal on adaptation to strengthen resilience and reduce vulnerability to climate change, including by identifying the collective needs and solutions for climate impacts that are already happening now. In a nutshell, what we need to focus on is preparation to adapt, prevention through mitigation measures, and protection through financial and other assistance that need to be provided by all stakeholders. And this will be key to resilience and sustainable action that take people-centered approach. We have several opportunities going forward, starting now at this conference and in the coming weeks and months, to engage and step up all efforts to find solutions, highlight the urgency of addressing climate change, and enhance political momentum in the lead up to COP27. And there are a few events, I'll just highlight, there's several others. There will be a regional climate week in Libreville in Gabon, the pre-COP in Democratic Republic of Congo, the UN General Assembly, of course, and COP. From our perspective, there are 5 priorities for us to reflect on. COP27 must be a moment to accept the urgency of our collective challenge and agree to enhance collaboration and cooperation in line with the scale of the challenge. COP27 will be the implementation COP, the first COP where nations must show that they will put Paris Agreement to work in their countries through the nationally determined contributions. COP27 will be about engaging all segments of the society, including non-governmental organizations, businesses, and especially the youth. I repeat, youth, extremely important. And I'm very pleased the Youngo have given a very strong voice and momentum to the urgency. And that all is under the banner of inclusive multilateralism. Given its geographical location, COP27 will have a special focus on adaptation and on the need to ramp up climate finance for the most vulnerable. And finally, COP27 will need to scale up financing. This is not only about 100 billion pledge that was made, but it's still not been fulfilled. We now need to work on shifting the trillions of public and private sector finance towards a low-carbon, resilient economies. I very much look forward to the declaration that is being signed today at the conference. I strongly, strongly believe that it can be a forceful message from here that should resonate beyond this region and gather support for recognition that the impact of climate change on human mobility is here and now, and it needs to be addressed. I thank you all very much.
Your Excellency, it is now my pleasure and honor to invite the Egyptian ambassador to Uganda to deliver his message, to deliver the message of His Excellencies Sameh Hassan Chorre, the incoming COP27 President. Mr. Ambassador.
Your Excellency, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Your Excellency, President Salva Kiir, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I stand here before you today on behalf of the Egyptian presidency of COP27. I want at the outset to thank the Ugandan government and the International Organization for Migration for organizing this important and pertinent event. The nexus between migration and climate change, in my opinion, is one that is incredibly important, but hasn't so far been addressed in a holistic and a comprehensive way. We also in Egypt look forward to the outcome of this discussion and the important contribution that Uganda, IOM, countries of IGAD and the East African community have made to advancing this conversation on the regional level. And we sure hope that we can take it from here to advance it on the continental and the global level during COP27. Excellencies, I don't think I am exaggerating if I said that the 27th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change comes at a very challenging time, at a very critical time. A time of cascading risks, challenges and threats to development, peace and security, some of which are related to climate change and the extreme weather events that are impacting the lives and livelihoods of millions of people around the world. Some others have to do with the global pandemic, with a war in Europe that has the impact of a global financial crisis as well as a food security crisis. In the face of these risks, challenges, and threats, it is actually not time for despair. It's actually time for hope, for coming together, for reviving multilateralism as we move forward. It is time for action. And that is the way I think it is safe to say that Egypt approaches the honor and the responsibility of hosting the next COP, Africa's COP. Our focus is to move from pledges to implementation, as was just mentioned. Our focus is not to lower, but to actually raise the expectations on issues of adaptation, mitigation, and since I am speaking from Uganda and on behalf of Africa, and yes, indeed, financing. This is an important issue that needs to be addressed. I want to assure you, Your Excellency, President Museveni and President Kerr, that we will do everything in our effort in order to, on one hand, make COP27 Africa's COP, and on the other hand, to raise the ambition rather than lowering it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Your Excellency, Honorable Keriako Tobiko, the Minister for Environment and Forestry of Kenya, was delegated by His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta to represent him at this function. I would like him to invite him now to deliver the President's message. Thank you.
Your Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda. Your Excellency Salva Kiir, the President of the Republic of South Sudan, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. Your Excellencies, first of all, let me convey the warmest greetings from my President, your friend, Uhuru Kenyatta, who would very much have wished to be here with you on this important occasion, but could not because of circumstances beyond his control. He has asked me to deliver, Your Excellency, his remark both as President, but also as the Chair of CAHOST. And it's my duty now, humble duty, to read his remarks. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. In our commitment through the convention to stabilize greenhouse gases concentration in the atmosphere in a time frame that would allow ecosystems to adapt naturally, ensure that food production is not threatened, and enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner. Despite the over 30 years of well-grounded scientific evidence and bold political commitments made at every global conference on climate change since 1995, global emissions have continued to rise. The sixth assessment report of the IPCC, released in April of this year, confirms that we are in a state of global climate emergency. The planet is warming up faster than anticipated, and 1.5 degrees centigrade will be reached before 2040 instead of the end of the century, 2100. This report further warns that climate hazards will increase in frequency and intensity. Further, the war in Ukraine is now being used as an excuse to backtrack on the commitments made by some of our developed countries, partners, to stop the use of coal. This lack of commitment by our developed country partners, including the G20 countries, to urgently reduce emissions and provide adequate climate finance to developing countries for climate action, is putting Africa in a crisis. Millions of our people are caught up in multiple intersecting crises. These include geopolitical tensions and conflict in South Sudan, Ethiopia, and DRC, land degradation, COVID-19 pandemic, and the climate-induced drought emergencies in the Horn of Africa. These multiple crises hit hardest where people are already living in vulnerable conditions, ill-equipped to withstand and to recover from consecutive disasters and conflicts. Excellencies, Africa is known for its long history of migration, both voluntary and forced. In many parts of the continent, communities are spread across 2 or 3 nations. Cross-border migration in Africa represents an important livelihood and coping strategy. It is often used as a route to flee from conflict, seeking pasture, or seek better socioeconomic opportunities. We all experience cross-border migration in different magnitudes within the East African Community region. To address these concerns on migration and climate change, the African Union Commission has developed a number of...
Both parents started working
climate resilient economies and communities. The recently launched Africa Climate Change Resilient Development Strategy and Action Plan for 2022-2032, whose aim is to enhance cohesion in the continent's approach to addressing climate change and the implementation of the Blue Economy Strategy. The legally binding African Union Convention for the Protection and Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons in Africa, known as the Kampala Convention. The Africa Climate Mobility Initiative, ACMI, whose comprehensive report on the climate-forced mobility in the continent and agenda for action, which will be launched on the margins of COP27. And the IGAD Free Movement Protocol to protect people from moving due to the impacts of climate change. The African Union also established the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change to ensure that Africa speaks with one voice in all climate and multilateral fora. Excellencies, as you are all aware, I was appointed to be the chair of the Committee of CAHOST on 2nd February 2022. Following this appointment, I held a CAHOST meeting on the 27th of June 2022 on the margins of the recently held UN Conference on Oceans. This meeting adopted the African Commission position, the African Common Position, and the key messages to COP27 as presented by Zambia as the chair of the AGN. 2, Africa's priority for COP27 as an implementation COP, as presented by Egypt as the incoming COP27 presidency. And lastly, Africa's common position on oceans as presented by the Africa Union Commission. The CAHOST meeting also launched the first African Climate Change Resilience Development Strategy and Action Plan 2022-2032, and the African High-Level Commission on Seas and Oceans to improve coordination and consolidate decision-making on ocean, seas, and blue economy around the continent. As agreed during CAHOST meeting, Africa priority for COP27 will focus on adaptation as a key priority for the continent, closing the existing climate finance gaps, especially on adaptation, financing loss and damage to the impacts of climate change, pushing for an ambitious mitigation plan for keeping 1.5 degrees alive, and recognizing, this is important, the special needs and circumstances of Africa. Further, to continue with the momentum to COP27, as a number of events and meetings have been lined up to mobilize, support, and consolidate our position in regional meetings similar to this meeting. Some of these events include Africa Climate Week, the Africa Climate Week in Gabon, AMSEN meeting in Senegal, pre-COP27 in DRC, climate meetings on the margins of the UN General Assembly, Africa Day at COP27, just to mention but a few. We once again express our fullest support to the Arab Republic of Egypt and to the designate COP27 President Egyptian Foreign Minister, His Excellency Samir Shakri. Excellencies, at the East African community level, a number of climate change and environment-related policy instruments have been formulated, with regular ministerial meetings convened to monitor progress on implementation. Despite these efforts, the region is still experiencing devastating climate change impacts, which know no political boundaries. These impacts and conflicts in the region have led to migration and internal displacement of our population without adequate resources to respond or monitor the movement. The World Bank report on internal climate migration in the Lake Victoria Basin countries released in 2021 projects that there will be 16.6 million to 38.5 million internal climate migrants in the Lake Victoria Basin countries by 2050, and that this could be reduced by 30% with concrete climate and development action. In the region, Kenya is a major recipient of conflict and climate change migrants, putting additional pressure on our limited resources, while we also have to deal with climate change impacts and other economic challenges. Excellencies, to respond to these impacts, my administration has put in place several disaster risk reduction mechanisms, environment and climate change legal instrument, institutional framework reforms, and safety nets, including cash transfers. Further, my administration committed to reducing emission by 32% against business as usual scenario by 2030. Despite these efforts, climate change continues to challenge our adaptive capacities and overwhelming, most particularly the youth, elderly, women, children, who are vulnerable and have contributed least to this problem. To survive climate change impacts and reduce climate-induced migration and displacement, Africa needs long-term investment in resilience building, early warning systems, and climate-resilient infrastructure. It is for this reason that I urge our developed country partners and big emitters to urgently reduce emission to keep 1.5 alive, meet their climate finance obligation in a transparent and timely manner, finance loss and damage, increase funding for adaptation, and recognize the special needs and circumstances of Africa. Finally, I want to take this opportunity to thank the government of Uganda for hosting us and the organizers of this meeting, and hope very much that we will integrate the outcomes of this meeting into the discussions during the upcoming COP27 in November of this year. I thank you for listening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for delivering the President's remarks. Your Excellencies, I would now like to invite Honorable Okello Oryem, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, who is representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs, to read the joint declaration on migration, environment, and climate change. Honorable Oryem.
Your Excellency, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, Your Excellency, Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, colleagues, ministers, honorable ministers in their different distinguished capacities, Excellencies, ambassadors and high commissioners, representatives of the IOM, Executive Director, dear brother of IGAD, distinguished ladies and gentlemen in their different capacities. I am Okello Oryem, I'm the Minister of State of Foreign Affairs of Uganda, in charge of international relations. This morning I have the distinct honor of reading the Kampala Ministerial Declaration. But let me also take this opportunity once more, welcome you all to Uganda for this very important meeting. We are grateful for this numerous attendance and us having a full house here. At the offset, Your Excellency, permit me to express my highest respect to both of you, and also please accept my warmest compliments. Your Excellencies, the Kampala Ministerial Declaration on Migration, Environment and Climate Change by member states of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, the East African Community, EAC, and states of the East African Horn of Africa. The Interministerial Conference on Migration, Environment and Climate Change on this 29th July 2022, Honorable Speaker Resort Munyonyo, Kampala, Republic of Uganda. We, the Ministers of Environment, Ministers of Interior, and Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the governments of the member states of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, and the East African Community, EAC, and the states of the East and Horn of Africa, having gathered together with high-level representatives on the African Union, UN, and development partners, and the youth at the Interministerial Conference on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change on 27th to 29th July 2022 in Kampala, Republic of Uganda. In the spirit of regional and integration and friendship that ties the countries of East Africa and the Horn of Africa region, namely the Republic of Burundi, the Republic of Djibouti, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the states of Eritrea, Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Republic of Kenya, the Republic of Rwanda, Federal Republic of Somalia, Republic of South Sudan, Republic of Sudan, United Republic of Tanzania, and the Republic of Uganda. Deeply concerned by the adverse effects of the climate change crisis on our people and livestock, place an urgent call for enhanced cooperation and action to address the following. A, the progressive desertification and land degradation create the forced mobility of people and livestock. B, the unsustainable use of ecosystems and the impact of frequent and intense extreme weather events on people and livestock. C, the unplanned migration of our people from rural to urban centers as a result of climate change and disasters. D, the paucity of data and statistics on the impact of climate change on human and livestock mobility in the region. And E, the limitations of partnership and financing to respond to the climate crisis adversely affecting the mobility of our people and livestock in the region. Recognizing that East and Horn of Africa region is severely affected by environmental degradation, floods, landslides, sandstorms, tropical cyclones, drought, water levels rise, and rainfall variability. Notably, in 2001 alone, 2.6 million new disaster displacements occurred in sub-Saharan Africa, creating climate mobility crisis. Determined to strengthen economic growth, sustain social cohesion, and sustainability in our region. Desirous of declaring our commitment to timely respond to critical matters of migration, environment, and climate change and its adverse impact on people and livestock through enhancing cooperation on the climate change mobility crisis. Note with concern that groups including women, girls, youth, the elderly, persons with disabilities, migrants, displaced persons, pastoralists, and minorities might be threatened with marginalization in exercising their rights to access climate action opportunities. Guided by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, 1966, United Nations Council Resolution 3520, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Paris Agreement of 2015, the United Nations Convention on Combat Desertification, 1994, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, 2015 to 2030, the Agenda for the Protection of Cross-Border Displaced Persons in the Context of Disaster and Climate Change, 2015, the New Urban Agenda, 2017, Article 28, the Conventions on Biological Diversity, 1992, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, 2018, the Global Compact on Refugees, 2013, the UN ILO International Labour Standards, the African Union Agenda, 2063, and the Glasgow Climate Pact, 2021. Recalling previous decisions of the Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, on long-term cooperation action to ensure understanding, coordination, and cooperation in regard to climate change-induced displacement, migration, and planned relocation, where appropriate at the national, regional, and international levels. Recalling that the Paris Agreement acknowledges that climate change is a common concern of mankind, that adaptation is a global challenge faced at local, sub-national, national, regional, and global dimensions, and contributes to the protections of people, livelihood, and ecosystems, taking into account the urgent and immediate needs of those small island states and developing country party that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effect of climate change. And the Paris Agreement, FCCC, CP 2015, L9 Decision 50, requesting the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanisms to establish, according to its procedures and mandate, a task force to complement, draw upon the work, and involve an appropriate existing bodies and experts group under the Convention, including the Adaptation Committee and the Least Developed Countries Experts Group, as well as relevant organizations and experts bodies outside the conventions, to the FCCC CP 2015 L9 Rev 18, development recommendations for integrated approaches to avert, minimize, and address displays related to the adverse impact of climate change. Noting the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the global goal of adaptation, with a view to enhance adaptation, actions and support in line with Cancun Climate Change Adaptation Framework and the Decision 1 CMA 3 Glasgow Climate Pact of 2021, acknowledging the rights of migrants when taking action to address climate change. Aware of the progressive work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in line with the Working Group 2 Report on Climate Change 2022, Impacts, Adaptations and Vulnerability. Recalling the mandates that emerge from the 26th UN Climate Change Conference, that is COP26 in Glasgow, in 2021, to inform the preparations for the 27th UN Climate Change Conference, that is COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in November 2022, towards robust climate actions, deeper cuts in greenhouse gas emissions, enhanced resilience to adapt to the effects of climate change, and financial support for developing countries, including preparations for the first global stocktake at the 28th UN Climate Change Conference, that's COP28, at the end of 2023. Recognizing and appreciating the leadership of the government of the Republic of Uganda in this dialogue on climate change, environment, and migration. Further recognizing and appreciating the partnership between IOM and the UNFCCC with member states, the AU, EAC, and IGAD in facilitating this important dialogue on the migration, environment, and climate change. In this context, therefore, we, the Ministers of Environment, Minister of the Interior, and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the EAC, IGAD, states of the East and Horn of Africa, having gathered key messages of experiences from government experts, the youth, community leaders, as well as development partners, in the spirit of international cooperation and regional integration, hereby commit to: 1. Build and strengthen climate resilience and adaptive interventions of all communities living in fragile ecosystems, flood-prone water basins, low-lying areas, and mountain slopes, including enhancing urgent regional and national legislation, policies, and strategies for action. 2. Implement and domesticate the provisions of the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. Underscore states' role to address desertification, land degradation, and drought as one of the drivers of poverty and forced mobility. 3. Facilitate a conducive regulatory and policy environment to enhance the socio-economic benefit of remittance, trade, and investment. 4. Engage multilateral development banks and financial institutions and development partners to create or extend financial relief to countries hosting migrants and disaster-displaced persons. Create and/or increase investments in the circular economy, renewable energy and energy efficiency, climate and smart agriculture, green economy, blue economy, digital economy, and nature-based solutions. 6. Develop comprehensive urban plans to address population surge in urban arising as a result of adverse impact of climate change in marginal rural areas, including promoting rural-urban collaboration to reduce vulnerability and create adaptive mechanisms for safe migrations and access for sustainable livelihood. 7. Work with the private sector to improve urban-rural connectivity for the youth and traders through internet access, technological advancements, provision of energy, and road or railway infrastructure. Number 8, establish and strengthen regional and national weather and climate institutions and systems to generate accurate, timely data and information on climate change impacts on human mobility, and increase collaboration amongst member states and with the IGAD Center of Excellence for Climate Prediction and Applications. 9, address knowledgeable gaps by understanding and applying indigenous knowledge and practice to the development of appropriate adaptation responses to reduce the context or specific vulnerability of communities to the impact of climate change. 10, apply and integrate gender and human rights-based approaches in the design and implementation of policies relating to climate change and migration nexus. 11, establish an IGAD, ESC, and States of East and Horn of Africa Interministerial Working Group on Climate Change, Environment and Migration, develop a plan of action for the implementation of this declaration, and monitor and report regularly on progress and implementation by member states. 12, request the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, AMCEN, the African Group of Negotiations, AGN, and the Group of 77 and China, and the LDC Group of Negotiators to take forward the work of IGAD, ESC, and States of the East and Horn of Africa Interministerial Working Group on Climate Change, Environment, Migration, and request to launch this Kampala Ministerial Declaration at COP27 with intentions to continue the work up to COP28 and beyond. 13, we further request the parties to A, take action to avert, minimize, and address displacements in the context of climate change and disaster, both across and within borders. B, strengthen support to countries and communities most vulnerable to climate change impacts to access new and additional scale-up climate finance. C, strengthen cooperation at all levels of government and communities and implement treaties, pacts, protocols, and regulations on free movement of people, labor, mobility, and transhumance. Facilitate capacity building and technology transfer for climate action and human mobility. E, create a multi-partner financing institution, including for youth, to avert, minimize, and address loss and damage, and advance the global goal of adaptation in the East and Horn of Africa. We remain committed to address the climate change crisis and its effect on our people, livestock in the East and Horn of Africa. Done, finally, done at Kampala, this 29th day of July 2022, in two originals in English and French, both texts being equally authentic, to be signed by all those who are here. I thank you very much. God bless you all.
Your Excellencies will now
transition to the second session that includes the signing of the declaration. And I want to invite crane performers in exactly 2 minutes to entertain us as we bring the tables in front and set up for that signing ceremony. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, surely a round of applause for crane performers. May I take the pleasure of inviting the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Sam Chaptoris, to come and invite our heads of delegation to take to the front for the declaration signing.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Your Excellencies. It is now my privilege to invite the head of delegations to move to that table in front there so that we can sign the declaration. Because of constraints of time, I would like to propose that we only sign one copy in the front of the heads of state, and then after the heads of state have delivered their speeches and have gone, we shall complete the exercise. So please, heads of delegations, can we move to those tables, to those two tables, and we sign the declaration. Is there a problem? The countries which will be signing will be the Republic of Burundi, of Djibouti, Democratic Republic of Congo, the State of Eritrea, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Republic of Kenya, the Republic of Rwanda, the Federal Republic of Somalia, the Republic of the Sudan, the United Republic of Tanzania, the Republic of Uganda, the People's Republic of Algeria, the Republic of Egypt, the Republic of Senegal, and the Republic of Zambia. Thank you. Hey, sorry. It appears I forgot the Republic of South Sudan. I'm extremely sorry. Yet it is the biggest delegation here. And please accept my apologies.
Your Excellencies, if you've noticed, there is 17 representatives in front of you. Those include the partners invited to witness this signing of the declaration, the Republic of Senegal, who are the presidency of the African Union, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the presidency of COP27, the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, who are guests to this interministerial conference, and the Republic of Zambia, who are chair of the African Group of Negotiators. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Great performers. Your Excellencies, may I request the delegates to each hold one folder for members of the press. We will all hold one folder and have it to show in front of the press and of course in front of the principals who are here today to show your commitment to this declaration. So, Lucy, if we could have each of the delegates have a folder. All right, so just one more. Front of the table, in fact. All right, so with your indulgence, our delegates will request that we will find a way. The press is on either side. So my suggestion, let's move to the front of the table. Lucy, if we could have our delegates move to the front of the table because the table becomes a distraction. And members of the press, this is your moment. I only have a minute before I invite the minister who will invite their excellencies to speak to us. So delegates, members of the press, find the perfect position because we must pronounce the great news of the Kampala Declaration, the Kampala Ministerial Declaration on Migration, Environment and Climate Change, signed here in Kampala on this 29th day of July 2022. So ladies and gentlemen, mine is request you now to put your hands together for our commitment to this Kampala Declaration. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, the Honorable Ministers, and Your Excellencies, the Ambassadors here. We thank you so much. Thank you very much, heads of delegation. Thank you so much. I now will take the pleasure of inviting the Honorable Minister, Sam Chaptoris, to invite the Excellencies to speak to us. You're welcome, Honorable.
I want to thank the ministers for signing the declaration. Your Excellencies, it is now time for our principals to address us. And I want to take this opportunity to invite His Excellency the President to chair the next session. Thank you very much.
His Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, the Honorable Ministers, and all the other delegates, it is now my honor. I want to congratulate you on signing the declaration. And it's now my honor to invite His Excellency General Salva Kiir to address you. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, Honorable Ministers and delegations that have come to this conference, distinguished senior officials of the pre-COP27 Secretariat, representatives of the East African Community, EAC, the Intergovernmental Authority and Development, IGAD, and Horn of Africa, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to convey my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to His Excellency and brother, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, for the warm reception and generosity he accorded to us, the attendees of this summit. This conference came at a critical time for our region. It came at a time when we are facing varied climate-induced disasters, such as floods, droughts, and landslides. These disasters affect our respective countries differently. Despite their different forms, recent studies have shown that we need to do one thing: adapt. And adaptation means devoting resources to building resilient communities. Your Excellencies, South Sudan has submitted its nationally determined contribution along with its first national adaptation plan to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. What is contained in these climate action documents can only be realized with the help of climate finance from the developed countries. This call for the developed world to provide resources for the climate adaptation was reaffirmed in the Paris Agreement. It is also justified by the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities in the same agreement. Despite the urgency of climate change, we are yet to receive 100 billion United States dollars pledged by the developed world to the developing world in 2020. While this amount is below the target, we have not received it, and we only hear that 2023 is the time it will be raised. By then, it may be too late. I have a young daughter who spoke here before, representing women and the youth. I want to assure her that South Sudan has given 35% to women in the current government. The woman is the Speaker of our National Assembly for the first time. And a woman is the Minister of Defense. So other ministers like whom you have seen here, the Minister of Environment, which we are talking about, is also a woman. As countries, we have contributed less to the emission of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, and the ones bearing the brunt of climate-induced disasters. We need to unite and call upon the developed world to meet its commitment to fund climate adaptation immediately. We cannot cope with the climate-induced disasters indefinitely. Big polluters in the world must live up to their commitments and avail the resources. Currently, over 60% of our people in South Sudan are categorized as food insecure and in need of life-saving intervention. From the climate-induced displacement, mainly flooding, the Republic of South Sudan has been struggling with record floods for the last 2 years. The floods have already destroyed many communities in the low-lying areas. In 6 out of the 10 states. In these areas, people's lives have been altered by internal displacement of over 1 million persons, along with destruction of livestock, wildlife, and crops. These floods induce losses, if not tackled urgently, can lead to increased irregular migration that can affect countries beyond our borders. Another issue of concern to us is deforestation. This is really critical because 99.9% of our population depends on forests as the sole source of energy. To us, a quick transition to clean and renewable energy will alleviate the resources on our forests. In our plan to save our forests, we target to generate 3,000 megawatts of power from hydro, solar, wind, geothermal, and natural gas. Achieving this goal requires financial support, capacity building, and technology transfer. All of which depend on climate finance. To effectively address climate change threat to our region and the world at large, South Sudan would like to, one, underscore the importance of adaptation. Our region needs a balance between mitigation and adaptation, where 50% of the climate funds be earmarked for adaptation projects. Two, stress that the $100 billion that was arbitrarily set is no longer sufficient. This amount needs to be raised upwards. Save it. Number 4. Yes. 3, appeal to all parties that have not submitted their national determined contributions to do so urgently to allow us to keep the 1.5 degrees goal alive. In closing, I would like to affirm South Sudan's commitment to Kampala Declaration of the ministers responsible for environment, migration, and foreign affairs of the government of the member states of IGAD and the East African Community. We will stand by what is agreed in this declaration on its entirety. Let us all go to Sharm el-Sheikh in November, speaking with one voice of this declaration. We have no other choice than to adapt to the changing climate. With faith in humanity, I have that the developed world will live to its commitment and avail the needed resources for this important task. Thank you very much.